This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome, everyone. So we will start with the session. So my name is Soumya, and I'll be your host for this session. So before I start, I would request everyone to go on mute. And if you will have any questions throughout the session, you can send them through chatbot. And at the end, we'll take all the questions. So let me introduce you to Tech Canvas first. So Tech Canvas is an IT certifications training organization for professionals, wherein we help students to crack their certification exams in first attempt. We are IIBA authorized training center and PMI authorized training institute. And we provide courses for ECBA, CCBA, CBAP, agile analysis, and business data analysis. And since we are PMI authorized, so we also provide training courses for PMP certifications and CAPM certifications. We also have domain courses into banking, finance, healthcare, insurance, and payments domain. So today we will be discussing on business analysis foundations, requirements modeling. And we have with us Mr. Abhishek Srivastav. So I would request Abhishek to take the session ahead. Thank you all for joining, and I hope you all have a great session.
Thank you, Soumya. Thanks very much. So welcome all. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are. I welcome you to this webinar. So in this webinar of approximately 1 hour, I'll be taking you through some of the concepts related to modeling of requirements. So as you can imagine, this is about handling requirements. And this is applicable to any professional who is involved with projects initiation, interacting with the stakeholders to gather requirements. So Soumya has already introduced Tech Canvas. About myself, I have completed 27 years in the IT industry since I started. So I have been into business analysis, project management, and various other management and strategic roles. Right now, I'm into business analysis, project management, helping aspirants to learn and achieve their career goals. I'm also an author and also get invited to some colleges for guest speaking. So on the agenda, we are going to look at the requirements, why it is important to have good requirements for the technology team so that an appropriate software which can be developed. So there are certain reasons why requirements are not captured correctly. So we'll look at those reasons also. And they will take up 2 examples to help you have an overview. Obviously, the time is not enough to have a very detailed session, but I will give you end-to-end picture of modeling of requirements so that you go with the right understanding of the process. And then we'll summarize and open the session for Q&A. So the first thing which we need to understand is there has been a history of project failures. And it is since the time software project development started. So as more and more projects started to get developed, it started to become bigger in size and more complex in size. So the challenges of understanding what does the customer want increased over a period of time. So there are companies which have been conducting surveys on how the projects are doing in general. So as you can see at the caption section, PMI, Standish Group, various agencies, including KPMG, have been doing these studies. And one interesting fact about all these studies is that the first 3 reasons for failure of the project are more or less the same in all these studies. And inaccurate requirements is always in one of the top 3 reasons. So the impact of capturing requirements inaccurately is the highest because if your requirements itself are not correct, means your software is not right. So no matter what you do, even if you develop the world's best software, if it doesn't meet the requirements of the customer, it's of no use, right? It's like somebody is asking for an apple and you're giving him an orange. So why does this happen? What are the reasons why we are not able to capture the requirements correctly? It's not always the fault of the people who are gathering the requirements or eliciting the requirements, meaning business analysts, project managers, whosoever is involved in the requirements gathering exercise. It's not always their fault. So what are these reasons? Reason number one, stakeholders are not prepared. Many a times, we don't prepare the stakeholders enough so that they are ready with the right set of information. Right set of information could include the format of the reports, the data, historical data, what is not working. All this information is required to be captured correctly so that it can be shared with the requirements engineers or business analysts or whosoever is there. So that is reason number one. Reason number two is on the project side, which is the people who are involved in the requirements elicitation do not understand the domain. For example, if I am going to capture requirements for a mutual fund or a stock market application, as a business analyst or as a person who is talking to the customer, I should be able to understand some common terms which the customer is going to use, right? So days high, days low, options, futures, derivatives. If I don't understand, how will I understand the concepts or the requirements related to those terms? It's going to be a bouncer. If you know cricket, there is a ball called bouncer, which goes above your head. It's similar to that. If I don't understand those basic terms or basic understanding of the domain, it's very difficult for anyone to really understand the details or nuances of the requirement. That comes under, again, the preparation of the background knowledge of the people involved. Third is, we don't give enough attention to getting into the depth of the requirement. So analysis, functional decomposition, there are a lot of things which are part of this particular step during the requirements elicitation. And that creates a lot of gaps if not done correctly. Okay, so that is where modeling of requirements come into picture. So there are several steps which are going to be part of this exercise when you are capturing the requirement. If somebody has read Babok or somebody has kind of gone through business analysis training earlier, Babok says about elicitation separately and the requirements separately. So there is a chapter called requirements analysis, and there is a separate chapter on elicitation or conducting elicitation. There is a difference. The difference is, it's like you're going to excavate somewhere and you get stones. It's like elicitation. You get stones, but when you kind of purify or extract the mineral, it either can become gold or something else. That's your requirement. So the stones are like elicitation, and if you don't properly process it or analyze it, we'll never reach or never figure out what kind of mineral is inside that stone. That is the difference between the step on just gathering, meeting the customer versus requirements analysis step. Very, very critical step in the requirements step. Finally, lack of review. So maybe I'm one of the most experienced business analysts. You can see 27 years, but am I perfect? Nobody is perfect. So if I'm doing something, there is every likelihood that I will make mistakes. Now, how will that be corrected? Unless somebody with a fresh set of eyes can look at it. So there is a concept in industry called 4 eyes and 6 eye review. 4 eyes meaning somebody does it, another person looks at it. 2 plus 2, 4. And if you are extra cautious, you can have one more person doing the review. So it becomes 6 eyes. Okay. So these are some of the reasons, and I've also suggested some of the common solutions to address it. Now, let's look at the concept of requirements modeling. What are the things which are involved in this process? Okay. In order to understand it, you also need to understand the stages of requirements gathering, in the sense that when you first time start talking to the customer, what is the level of information which you get versus when you end up with the requirements phase, what kind of information you should be having. That is the contribution of the people who are involved in the requirements elicitation, right? And that is what you have to understand. If you are a business analyst, or you're going to be a business analyst, or anybody who is in the similar role. So when customer starts a project, just one second. Is everyone able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear. Yep.
Okay. So I see some messages, and so it's typically if majority of the people are able to hear, it could be a network issue, or when you are connecting to the GoToMeeting, you have to choose the option of connect to computer audio. Generally, that is the reason why you can't hear me. So you have to kind of log out and re-log in with that option selected. Or you can check the settings where your microphone or the speaker's card is properly selected. Generally, that is the problem. Okay. So coming back to the business or the requirements, is that when we start talking to the customer, what you get is something known as business requirement. That is the business angle or the business version of what do they want. What happens next is you start talking to individual stakeholders, right? Because there is nothing called organization. Organization comprises of people. So to understand more, you need to talk to people who are also known as stakeholders. So the next step would be to start talking to the stakeholders. So the requirements which you get from stakeholders is termed as stakeholder requirements. Once you start getting that information, that is when you have to start thinking in terms of software. How will that requirement be fulfilled in the software? So you can imagine in most of the cases, the stakeholder requirements will be addressed by creating certain screens in the software. So what will you do? You will start thinking about how the stakeholder requirements can be fulfilled. Kindly go on mute, please. Yeah, thank you. So from the stakeholder requirements, which you get from the individual stakeholders, you start thinking in terms of how it will happen in the system or how it will be used in the system. Those kind of requirements are called as system requirements or solution requirements. There is one more requirement which is not kind of an evolution, but something which is also captured along with other requirements is called transition requirements. These are typically one-time requirements like training the people, getting data migrated. Those kind of requirements are known as transition requirements. So let's take an example first to understand what I am talking about. So example of a business requirement, very simple example. I have not picked up very complicated ones because it's a 1 hour duration, but to idea is to help you understand the concept. So let's say this is a requirement called only authorized users can log in into the system and access the banking service. So that is what a bank as an organization is saying, that we can't allow anybody to access banking services, quite logical and obvious, unless they have some kind of access given to them by us. That is how things start. This is a business requirement. They are just saying who will be authorized. Now you start talking to the stakeholders. Stakeholders will start telling you, okay, these are the possibilities. What are they thinking about how the login will happen? Whether it is user ID, password, or some other mechanism. So they can come up with, you can log in using user ID, password, mobile number and OTP, or even with a security data. That's a perspective which individuals can give, more detailed and much better than business requirements as far as software is. So what do you do next? You start thinking, how will I do it in the system? That is when you get to the next level of identifying how it can be done. So what do? You create a prototype. Okay. What is a prototype? Simple screen. You get it designed either by yourself using a tool or by your developer or a web designer to show it to the customer. So option number 1, log in with user ID and password. You show it to them. Option number 2 and 3, or rather 1 and 2, either by user ID or by mobile. These are actual screens taken from one of the banks in India. Okay. Then another stakeholder says we can also log in using security device. So if anyone has an account with HSBC, you'll know that they send you a device which generates a number, random number, every time you try to click on the button. So you enter your user ID and you enter that security code and you can log in. These are the different options available. And by using the prototype, which is a kind of requirements modeling, you have now identified exactly how it's going to be done in the system. No code is written except the UI part. So prototyping is one of the very, very common requirements modeling. And this is how it is. Some of the very commonly used techniques for requirements modeling are use cases, prototypes, and process. Now, I have intentionally left user stories from this because I'm strictly talking about modeling too, visual. Okay, user stories are very popular as a requirement capturing tool or requirement capturing technique, but it's not a visual model. Okay, so that has been left out. We are focusing on only visual model. So use cases are important in terms of how we capture requirements. Early stage requirements capturing too. Now, what is significant about use cases is that it not only identifies what is going to be done, but also who is going to. So two important aspects it covers. One is who and the other one is what. These two are very important aspects of requirement. Okay. Now, once you created the use cases, it kind of gives you a control or the track of what are the different requirements or functions which are going to be there in the system. Right? So from there, you start moving into either a process model or a prototype. Now, why these two are or not always and is because let's talk about the login screen. There is no step per se, there's no process there. You just enter the details and you log in. So there, creating a process diagram does not make sense. So we straightway get into prototype. But if you're talking about funds transfer, for example, when you transfer funds to somebody, maybe as a payee, for example, mobile bill, or to a friend, or to somebody whom you're asking for some service, there is a process, right? You add a payee or add a beneficiary, then you transfer the fund, then it goes to some network or some channel to make that fund, right? So both of these are use cases, login as well as funds transfer. But login will not have a process or process diagram, whereas funds transfer will have a process. Okay, so that is something which is important to understand, that modeling, whenever we are modeling requirements, is not an academic exercise, right? In when you are college studying in the college, there are a lot of things which we just do because we are asked to do. But in real world, it's not about whether process modeling is mandatory or not. It's about, does it make sense to create a process? Will it help in modeling the? If the answer is no, you don't make it. If the answer is yes, you make it. Okay. So these are the most commonly used techniques. There could be many other techniques, but obviously that requires a lot of other discussions like concept model, data flow diagram. There are a lot of things which are also there in the industry, but these are the most frequent used. These are some of the tools which are used for modeling. So this is MS Visio, which is very popular in terms of UML model and flowchart. It provides a lot of facilities to create use case diagram, process diagram, and many other UML based diagrams. Similar to that, we have something called, the icons don't have the name, called draw.io. It's a free tool. MS Visio is a paid tool. That's the difference. But these are almost similar. Then there's something called Visual Paradigm. There are many other tools also. Rational Inc., which is now part of IBM. So they also have a tool. But these are a little heavy duty tools. They're not simple because they have many other features. These are more like case tools. So if you're looking for quick process diagrams or use cases, you should use any one of them. Then there are prototyping tools like Balsamiq, which is again a commercial paid tool. Then there is Pencil. Just like draw.io, it's a free tool. You can use this. If you don't have, your company doesn't have the license. If the company has license for Balsamiq, you can use that. Now, Java and ASP.NET is mentioned here because in some cases, you might have to ask your developers and designers to create the prototype. So that's where you have to use the actual platform so that it can be created. So whether PHP or Java or .NET. Okay, let's take one more example before we finish. So let's say there is one more requirement from the business saying the project proposal are prepared by sales manager. So there's an organization which understands what is to be done from their customers. Hey, let's say, for example, they are selling some customized product. Okay, so it could be, let's say, perfume. I'm just giving this example because recently we came across one company which sells customized perfume. Okay, so they brand it for a particular customer. So for every requirement, they will prepare a proposal that this much cost it will take and this much time it will take. That's the process which we are looking. But it has to be approved before it is sent to the customer. So they want a system for that. That's the business requirement. Okay. So now in that case, after all your preparation part, which is right from stakeholder to training and all of that, you start talking to the customer. And that is when you get requirements from the individual stake. So at that stage, what will you do? You will create a use case that. In the previous example, we hadn't, I intentionally left out use case to avoid a little complexity. So you first start creating use case. Who will do what? In this case, for example, the sales manager will create the proposal and the approver will approve the prices so that it's sent to the customer. And there will be some other things like they will also send it for approval. Okay. Now, what is the next step? We have identified the high level requirement. The next step is to start modeling the process, which is the approval process itself. So we will create a process diagram for how this entire cycle will happen. What if, for example, this clarification will never come if you are just doing the use case. So when you create the process, you will have this question saying, okay, what if it is not approved? How will this work? So that kind of discussion will tell you possibly that, okay, you send it back to the manager to modify it before it is sent back again for approval. And then you start creating the prototypes for the requirements so that you can take it to the customer to get it up. That's a typical cycle of how requirements start from business side and then slowly move into prototype stage. Okay. So how many of you are aware of these techniques? Use cases, process diagram, and prototype. Just type in the chat window. Okay. 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 So James is aware of all. Some of you are aware but not use it. Okay. Yeah. So what kind of issues do you face in modeling? Let's say, for example, you are creating a process diagram or you're creating use case. What kind of problems do you face? Okay. So changes, Anand says changes to the process. Diksha is saying not everyone understands it. Okay, so acceptance is a problem. They don't understand use cases. That is something which I can completely identify. But are you also having stakeholders who don't understand process diagram and prototypes? Adding requirements which are sure. Yeah, go ahead.
So basically, sometimes the complexity is so much of a particular requirement that everybody is just busy in making sure that it's consumed well, understood well by means of wireframes. So in my project, wireframes is something which is aggressively used and understood. So even when I had tried to bring in the process modeling techniques, they were not. It was not very much invited, and I think because of the complexity.
Correct. Quite likely. So what you can see in those cases, what can be done is that by using the prototypes itself, the screens, you can create a demo of process. Rather than creating a process diagram, there is a hybrid method. I mean, it's like a creating some kind of changes to the standard diagrams or standard models and say, okay, let's say for example, you create a PowerPoint presentation and you put the prototypes. Okay, and then in the PowerPoint you can arrange it in such a way that they go from one step to another step without actually giving the process diagram to the customer, but still you achieve the same point. So if they are not, because also you have to note that prototypes alone does not guarantee that the process is also well understood and confirmed. There are many times situations where processes have different scenarios which prototypes can't handle. So in some cases, especially when the things are very complex, you can probably make use of those kind of little tweaking to get a confirmation on both prototypes as well as process. Okay, Vicky Chen is saying I'm still trying to grab it. Okay. Customers don't approve. Okay. Okay, Anand is, you're lucky. Your stakeholders understand both. So Laratun saying stakeholders could understand prototypes. Yeah, correct. That is correct. Okay. So change is definitely one of the challenges of challenges for any business analyst or anybody who's involved in working on a project, because it's something which is very sensitive in terms of customers do want it. I mean, I always give the benefit of doubt to the customers that they genuinely need that change, and somehow they come pretty late with the change. That is where the waterfall versus agile and all those things will come into picture. So that is beyond our scope, but that's definitely, change is definitely a problem, could be a problem, but change is also something which is the fact. So everybody is trying to figure out the most suitable way to handle changes. So that struggle is still going on for the IT industry. Okay. So before we get into the question and answers, I see a few questions there. Let me recap. So primarily the idea was to give you a brief in terms of the cycle of how requirements evolve from the business stage to the solution stage. At this stage, you are essentially saying that this is how the solution will be created. You are not developing the solution, but you are moving from what to how with the help of the stakeholder. Okay, and that is where the modeling comes very, very handy. And if you can use it smartly, we can achieve a lot of accuracy in the requirements. As far as modeling is concerned, one of the important things is that we should always consider modeling as a tool to help you confirm the requirement. Okay, so sorry, just one. If customer is not comfortable with one particular technique, or they find it difficult to understand, try and figure out an alternative which can work in that particular case. That will be a good strategy to work. All right. So with that, I have finished. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi Abhishek, this is Anand Srinivasan. I have a question. How detailed a business analyst need to go into the technical depth of writing the requirements? How technically deep a requirement should be? In other words, that's my question.
So when you are saying technical, what are you referring to?
Technical meaning to help the developer understand on the go. Hey, here is what I need to develop to fulfill this requirement. Both the designer and the developer, even more from a how to even build the architecture, the solution interface, and so on. So, did I answer your question?
Yes, sir. Correct. Understood. So look, one of the things which you definitely need to provide is the detailing on the elements of your UI. Okay, so something which is, you can call it as logical data model or a data model. That is because, let's say for example, you are having a screen where you have something called PNR number or something which needs to be understood. Now, let's say you say PNR number. You know PNR number, right? You see it on your flight tickets or train tickets.
Yes.
Now think about a developer. You have said PNR number on the screen. Now, as a developer, I will say, okay, it's a number, right? So I will make this field as a number.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a number. You know that. It's an alphanumeric.
Yes.
Now, that is a critical information to be conveyed to the developer. So, the step after the prototype finalization is to create that logical model, maybe tabular format, and provide that information to the developer. That is one part of the data model. Another part is business rules, right? So, for example, if customer has to be identified, which happens all the time in a bank or any financial services organization.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how will that logic come from? Developers can't generate that logic. Who has gathered this logic? The business analyst.
Mm-hmm.
Where will you put it down? So, as far as the detailing of these requirements are concerned, these are the things which you need to provide. But absolutely nothing on architecture, solutions, and interface. Because you are not good at that. That is not your role.
Okay.
So you absolutely avoid that part of it as to how it be implemented.
Okay. Makes sense. So in your example, Abhishek, I have a follow-up question like the PNR number, which is a field that say I identify as a requirement to be presented in the user interface. So in that case, if I understand it correctly, should I mention, hey, what that field type should be, the field length should be, and what if the user mistypes some information on that particular field? and so on? Should I provide requirements around those
Yes.
dimensions? Okay.
Yes. So whether you're using a user story card in the agile environment, or you're using an SRS or FSD or FRD document, you can provide in any of the formats. Okay, I mean that's not a constraint, but providing that information is important.
Sure, makes sense, Abhishek. This is really helpful. And sorry, one more follow up there. So when it comes to logical data model and physical data model, today in my team, my developer works on it based on the UI components. For example, the data fields and elements that I elicit from the business team. So is it okay if a business analyst even doesn't get that far into building those data models or those, I think, what is called as entity relationship diagrams along those lines?
I don't think that is required these days. You say, look, we work very closely with developers these days. I mean, the whole idea of creating a Bible, I mean, so to speak, and give it to the developers, and then you move on to some other project. Those things are less and less in projects these days. Okay, so you work very closely with the developers. A diagram, which sometimes even developers will not understand.
Okay.
So better is that just create a table, give the information, and be available to them if they have any questions. That should be more practical.
Sure, Abhishek. Thank you again. Thank you so much. That has answered my question.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, Abhishek. This is Vicky here.
Yes, Vicky.
Very good evening to you.
Good evening.
Very well. I have a question. Actually, I've got two questions. The first question is basically, I'm not from the IT background, not at all. I'm a zero knowledge about IT. All through my career, I have 10 years of experience in sales and marketing related to customer relations. So since I got the invitation to join this webinar to understand what my question is basically to understand if I learn these skills, where these skills is applicable in my industry. Is it like applicable to non-IT industries, or like just thinking about my career-wise, perspective? I want to change my skills, or I want to improve my skills, or I want to change my job roles entirely. So will it going to help me? How it is going to help me out? Like, do I need an IT background?
Which industry you are from? Which industry you are from?
I'm basically right now currently in the industry. I've been the experience in the banking as well, in hospitality and sales and marketing as well, over the last 10 plus experiences I have. So you can say customer relations, sales, and hospitality. These industries I have been all together, never been to IT industry. So do you think my skills, acquiring this knowledge, can help me out for my future prospect of growth? Or which are the domain I can look into it if I complete this course?
So let's look at it this way. First thing is the modeling technique in general is useful to any industry. There is no restriction that it is only for IT or non-IT. Let's look at the real estate industry. When you walk into a sales office of a real estate developer, a project, residential project, you see models. Right? You have models of how the apartment blocks are, where is the swimming pool, where are the other amenities. So that's a common thing. Whether you are, or when movie makers make animation movies, it's all modeled. So that's nothing to do with only IT. So that is part one to answer. Now, as far as IT industry and your movement to IT industry is concerned, look, business analyst profile is the only profile where IT industry does not discriminate between IT and non-IT background. So the reason is, let's say, for example, there is somebody who is a techie, who has 10 years of experience in writing programs. Now, can that person straightway go to the customer and start gathering requirements?
No, it's quite difficult at times.
Quite difficult, right? Now, where will they find, IT industry find these kind of people? That is where people from all different, from different industries, are being accepted as business analysts in the IT. If you come from hospitality industry, for example, and a company, an IT company is developing software for hospitality industry, do you think if you learn business analysis, you'll be able to do justice to that role better
Indeed,
compared to a
yeah.
completely techie guy?
True indeed. Yeah.
So that is the way it is working right now. So people from all, in not only sales and marketing, people are coming from operations, relationship management. A lot of fields people are coming and getting into IT industry as business analysts.
Does it has a good future prospect, like a guy like me? I mean, as I told you, only having these kind of experience. Does it have any future aspect of it?
Business analysis has a good, see, look, IT industry is one of the still better of the industries compared to many other industries, right? So the growth prospects are better in general. That is one. Now, as I told you, why business analysts are required? Because the problems with the requirements is a genuine problem of the IT industry. Okay, so they need people who have the experience of handling customers, people who come from some domain knowledge from other industries. Okay, so that is your starting point. Even going forward, look, the industry today has become such that anyone with the capability of solving a problem can do really well.
Okay.
Okay, business analyst, one of the key elements of a business analyst's job is to help customer find a solution to a problem. So if you get experience with that, future is like you can get into data science. Every project or every initiative requires somebody who can understand customer problem and give it to the techies who can then write all complex algorithms and whatnot.
Okay. I got it.
It has good prospect.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Abhishek. Thank you for your answer.
Good evening, everyone. Mariam Saeed is here. I need to ask only one question. Like, what do developers expect us that as a prototype we will be delivering to them? For example, do they expect that we will be providing the screen design as well, other than requirements, or we only need to define or capture the requirements in a prototype? And my another question is not actually related to this session, but still I need to ask. Tech Canvas lastly conducted a BA budget session. So I need to know if there are any other more related sessions going to be conducted in future.
You said BA quiz?
Yes, BA quiz.
Yeah, it is going to be a regular event. Maybe once in, I don't know, Soumya can answer it. But I think there is one PM quiz is coming up. Yeah, Soumya.
Yeah, so actually we will be conducting quiz every month. So for BA it happened, and this month we are going to conduct a quiz for project management. So if you're interested, you can participate. You can visit to our website, and there in the event section you can find the details of all the webinars, upcoming webinars, and even the quiz. So you can register.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so coming to the first question. So you are asking from a business analyst perspective, right? What do you need to have in the prototypes?
Yes.
So look,
because I need to get, for example, in my company, they usually restrict business analysts that it is not your responsibility to provide the design of the screen, because then developers will exactly copy the screen. It is their responsibility to think about how will the screen look like, where do they have to place the buttons. So I'm always confused, like, is it our responsibility or not?
So look, the idea of creating a prototype is not to look at the look and feel of it. As a business analyst, you are not looking at the look and feel part. That is correct. So as far as look and feel is concerned, it could be a designer or a developer's perspective, which is okay. But how the fields or the elements on the prototype will be ordered. How can the developer decide? How will developer even understand some of the fields which are typically there on this? So it's not about just fitting different elements logically in any order. It's about a business requirement. As to some of the things will be kind of coming from a drop down. Some of the values will be dependent on the value selected in the drop down or radio buttons. Those kind of things, developers can't even imagine. How will they know? Because these are business related aspects. That they cannot create, isn't it? It's not possible for them. So that part you have to create. So what you can do in this case, simple solution. You use a tool like Pencil. It's a prototyping tool, or even a simple use PowerPoint or Word document to create a rough sketch of the screen, or even use a piece of paper and pencil.
In our company, we are using Balsamiq. Balsamiq is very good for wireframings. Previously, we were using Azure for prototyping, but linking the screens is not possible in or not much more appropriate in Balsamiq as compared to Azure.
Yeah, so your focus should not be on look and feel. Your focus should be how the elements of the screen are arranged, where each of the fields should be positioned as far as the business side or the end user side of the story is concerned. The look and feel, the design, the button color, that you can leave it for the designers and others. I guess that is what your company is telling you.
Yes, you're right.
So anyway, it's good for you if you don't bother about the design, because that's something which you can leave it for the web design. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. Chris has a question. Yeah, so the second part answer, whether prototype wireframes and mockups are the same. In essence, yes, they are basically user interface. But in terms of their finesse, in terms of their quality or fidelity, they're different. Okay, so you can say that prototype is the highest fidelity or highest quality of UI. So that is where you use actual designers to create your header and footer, and with proper colors and everything. So prototyping is going to be the most expensive way of creating UI templates. Okay, so in terms of both cost, in terms of time, everything. Wireframes and mockups are inferior version in terms of the finish of the UI. They may not look like the exact screen. They may not even look like anywhere close to the actual prototype or actual screens in the final software. So when, let's say for example, you use a piece of paper and draw the diagram, right? That is also a form of prototype. And that's pretty much accepted in the organization because it's a valid way of quickly getting the requirements confirmed with the stakeholder. Okay, you don't want to miss and you don't want to have a follow-up session later on by creating something, sending it to the customer. You get it done right. Or you use a tool like Balsamiq or Pencil, which is better than pencil, piece of paper and pencil, but not as good as prototype. So those are something which can be termed as mockups. Wireframes like the roughest form of creating UI. That is the difference. So the prototypes cannot be created by business analysts. As I was answering Mariam's question, you don't have the skills to create those prototypes. So as a business analyst, you can create mockups and wireframes, not the prototype. All right. Any other question? You're welcome, Anand. All right. So in case you have more questions, more queries, you can obviously write to info@techcanvas.com or visit the website at techcanvas.com. So I'll stop here. Thank you everyone for participating. See you in possibly some next webinar next month. Thank you. Thank you once.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you.